All right, friends, welcome. This is volume 2 from 100 Days of Flow. I have finished the second volume. So if you missed the first walkthrough of the first volume, I'll link that video in the description. But now we are at volume 2. So as I start this video, I wanted to show you what these little watercolor sketchbooks look like. So you can see the one on the right is what it looks like new. So you can see it's really small, the pages close very easily, but then you notice after I use them, they spread out a bit. And you can really see in volume 2, that last section, those 20 days where I put so much water on the page, it gets into the binding, and so it doesn't close as easily, but the paper has held up really well and the binding's holding up really nicely. So you can see this one, it's not going to close, but that's okay. I can put things on it and hold it closed a little bit. Well, now let's dive into seeing what's inside this journal. This volume, I added the cover on it when I did the first volume's cover. This was a scrap piece of paper where I was practicing some lettering. So you can see it works perfectly on the front, and I've got this, it's so colorful on the back. Love it so much. So we just continued on in volume 2 where we left off at the end of volume 1. So a reminder of my intention, each day I come, I limit myself to 4 tools. So you can see for this one, it was 3 colors of paint and a sparkle pop pen. So first thing I want you to notice that shimmer, that's the sparkle pop pen. The ink goes on beautifully and it's so shimmery. So let's look, and we'll see each day. I'll just kind of talk you through. This was the first day I started using gold gouache, which is hard to spell, but it is great. It's similar to a watercolor, but it's more opaque, so it will reactivate. And then continuing back to that blue and orange from the first volume, look at this background. That's a combination of this orange and blue. So that's the beauty of exploring. You will find happy accidents along the way. So this is quite unexpected for me, and I was like, I love it. And then I moved into, I'm working on revising the Doodle Flowers class. So I started exploring some of these shapes to add to it. And then on day 37, I had an idea. Several of you have the 100-day playbook and are not quite sure what to do with it. So let me show you. So on day 37, I pulled out my original journal. This is the Joyful Doodles from 2021. So if you have the playbook, this is what you get. We have scanned in this exact artwork. So you get the scans of the artwork and the blackline masters. So it is a playbook for you to use in many different ways. So here's another example of how to use it. So looking at day 37, I decided to use the quote. I express myself through truth and creativity. So I only took the quote and put it in my new little journal. And then I looked at the page for inspiration for design elements. I took the border. I kept the sun shape, but I didn't have room for the flowers. And then I also kept the color palette as inspiration. So this is how you look at the work or the playbook that I've given you and turn it into your own. On day 38 was faith. And you can see this one, I used only the quote. And then this year I used only the word, but I also kept the color palette. And here's a little design element I kept the little flower here at the bottom. So I wanted to show you this, so those of you with the playbook, you might get a few more ideas. I love this spread so much. I love Feast and Fit. You can see it's so reflective. The lights are shining on it. This is the black glaze pen. It dries very glossy with a plastic finish. So on this side, I reversed it. So instead of the background being black, the foreground or the letters are black, and I took the designs off of the letters and kind of that rainbow format to make the background. And then the next page, I kind of flipped it. So on this page, the black was the letters, and over here I made the black the background and took the colors and put those in the letters. Now, someone commented on when this was on Instagram, they were like, what's the point of doing the black? That seems, you know, basically pointless to use the black pen for this. This is a mindfulness practice for me, and I love black glaze pens. And it took me a while to fill that in, and I was just delighted doing it. So the point, it's not a point for anyone else. The point is for me. Am I creating art that brings me joy? And this page was a lot of joy. Let's move along. Let's check out focus. So I kept the quote, I kept the color palette, and then I explored a different way to use circles over here in my new one. For forgiveness, I just used the quote and the color palette. For foster, I did this one a little more similar. I looked at the lettering, so I copied the lettering. And then I love foster creativity every day. I wanted all of those words in the new version, so I did that. I mimicked the background pretty well, but then I had a new element. So this one, I like the line down the side with the black on it instead of the florals. That worked for me. And then for free, I did a more traditional faux calligraphy, but I did a 2-page spread. So here's another idea. If you take these small journals, you could do a 2-page spread to take one of those and put in it. So that's another option for you. Look at that. So I took the color palette, brightened it a bit, and I didn't use the details on the letters. I did just a few dots on each side. Now let's look. Friendship. This one's cool. So this is to give you, I get asked a lot, how do you come up with ideas? So what I'm teaching you here is I want you to see how I look at something and how I transform it into something else. So when I look at friendship, I see there's a sun here, and the quote says, stay close to people who feel like sunshine. So kind of that sunrise, that warm, those warm colors. And I kept that here with, I did some lifting, I think, of some of the colors, did the friendship, so it looks like 2 different words, but all together. And I took the quote in a radial format around the edge. Now we should see glow next, but there was a big event this year and I switched. So I didn't do glow next. I did giving. And check this out. This is one where I kept it about the same. Very similar in style, in color palette, even the lettering down here. It is in giving that we receive. I did the last bit a little in a little more legible format, but I kept it about the same. So there's another way you can do. So you can copy, you can transform, and then the other thing is you can just use the words. So let's go back to doing that. This is what glow looked like in the original, and this is what my glow looked like this year. And just so you know, this was April 8th. This was the day of the eclipse. And we were in totality for 3.5 minutes. And it was wonderful. So I actually noted that here in my journal, in addition to the tools and the colors that I would use. So these were Fine Tech watercolors. It was not the gouache. So I used 3 colors of Fine Tech with the black watercolor. And it was a special day, so I did go ahead and break my rule. I did add in, use the gold and silver deco colors as well. It was a fantastic day. And this kicked off my exploration for 20 days. I explored black watercolor and gold gouache. So this was quite a contrast to my normal practice. And it was I had never used black watercolor before. And so I didn't know how it would behave. And for 20 days, I explored it. And this was the gold gouache interacting with the watercolor. This one, I was doing some wet on wet, had a little bit of that thing I do with the jar, a little bit of the glaze pens, a little deco color. And what I learned is I didn't like the glazed pens back here. I thought it was too much. I wanted it to be a little bit softer. But again, I kept going. Explored with these stick shapes are created with the heat gun when I push the watercolor off the page. We've nicknamed those snail trails. And then again, just exploring all of the color you see from the gray to the black is only black watercolor with varying amounts of water added to it. So I find this is really interesting. This entire page, this was 3 tools. So I do enjoy that of stripping things down. When I use the black watercolor and the gold wash, then that gives me 2 additional options. So I've been taking the deco colors and doing the gold and silver. Really like those on top of it. This page might be my favorite in the entire, my favorite one of the entire 153 days here. This background was so beautiful. It's watercolor. It's the black watercolor with a lot more water. And I just love the way I couldn't control really what was going on with the gouache, and I would just drop it and put watercolor over it. And I thought this one it has a, almost like something reminds me of like the universe or space. And so then what was interesting in this is I'm really toned it down, just to the black and the gold, and how different they would look when I would add gold with the black versus if I did something that was only silver with the black and the gray. That became kind of interesting to me as well. The interplay of like how much texture could I get on the back, how much texture could I get in front, and of course playing with some funky little letters. That's a lot of fun. And so here you can see what I was talking about. I had so much water on these pages, it just like blew up the binding there. And I know there are ways to not do that, but I really had so much fun doing this one, doing this with a lot of water and just seeing what would happen. So intuition coming in. And then we had journey. This was quite a page. So I decided to explore with the acrylic ink. So we have acrylic ink, watercolor, and gouache. They are all liquid format, but they react very differently. And so it was sort of like when I put the ink on first and then put the watercolor and the black watercolor just overpowered that turquoise. And then when I put the gold gouache on, it overpowered the black watercolor. So it was quite a journey. That was the comment on Instagram. They were like, wow, this one was a journey. So if you want to see kind of what it looks like, you can pop over into the reels to see that. But yeah, that was the black just looks really, really nice. And so this almost reminds me of like some bioluminescence. But the shocker on this page was all of these pages, nothing bled through. And I was using a ton of water on them. But on this one, I put ink, watercolor, and gouache. And when I turned it over, the ink had bled through. So that was just mind-blowing to me. Joy took so many turns. This one I love the word joy. I love joy. And this one was a true struggle. I mean, honestly, I finally got it to this point and moved on. This was using the colors here. I count this as really using the black watercolor and the silver. This purplish and the blue, those were just left on the little plate. So I was using something off of the palette. And now looking at day 60, this is the one where we draw with water and drop in the watercolor and the gouache. And what I want to call your attention to is back in volume 1 on day 32, I used the same technique. And so I wanted you to see this where you can do the same technique, but if you change your inputs, you can get a very different look. So this is another way to get an abundance of ideas to where just change the colors and repeat it and explore and be curious. In day 61, here's an example of how I use the jars to create texture. So I place them on and dry around it, but you can also use it as a stamp. And this one is so interesting because it looks like sort of a mirror image in some way. And what really makes this one work is the repetition of the circles on both pages and then the lines. So see, I'm doing the lines to create the circles and lines within the circles. And then we moved on. This one is a 9 square on day 62. And yes, it is a recycled, upcycled idea. So in volume 1, remember there was on day 22, I did the little colorful squares and put colorful rectangles and put the flowers in it. So I just did this again with only the black watercolor and the silver deco color pens and used the glaze pen too. So for this one, instead of flowers, I practiced my lettering and I took the word love, which was the word of the day, and just created it in many different ways. So I wanted to share this with you. It is not a new idea. I am taking the idea and adapting it, changing the color, changing the size, changing what's on it. But in essence, it's the same structure. I wanted to share that with you. I think that's kind of fun. Now this one is a little bit different. I don't think anything like this showed up in the first one. So this was a larger brush. And with this, I was able to explore layering. So I would come with the lightest and then I would take another stroke. So you see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 strokes basically of the large ones. And then I explored, I thought it would be interesting to see if I could explore just using some cast shadows to see if we could get a little more dimension to it, to where it has a little 3D impact. And that one turned out really well. So that's our walkthrough all the way to day 63. And I realized I want to show you one more thing. Here we go. Day 27 and day 61. Look how similar. So some things are the same and some things are quite different. But again, I wanted to share this, that question of where do you get ideas? I recycle a lot of ideas. So I have some things that are very comfortable to me and I continue to explore them. So that is a detailed walkthrough that shows you in this volume 3 how I began. I was kind of continuing from volume 1. And you can see kind of like a little struggle. I didn't know what to do, so I returned to the 100-day playbook to restart. And so those 10 days gave me a little space, and then that shift to this black and gold, I'm really glad that I did this. It's way out of my comfort zone. And at first I was only going to do it for 10 days. And so that's part of why I like this structure. So giving myself permission to do 10 days, I was still awkward learning these tools. And so I'm really glad I decided to push it for 20 days with the black and the gold, because what I see when I flip through this, I see this awkwardness in the beginning and kind of just trying out some things. Some of it I liked. And then I see kind of a transition into more comfort with the tools. And then, a little more exploration, but I'm really, really glad that I extended this. Now, here was the big turning point when I tried to bring that color back into it, and it really kind of threw me for a loop. And then I was like, okay, let's keep going. And I'm really, really delighted that I did and recycled some other ideas from volume 1. So that concludes our volume 2, and drop a comment if you like the more detailed explanation in the walkthrough here. And I'll be beginning volume 3. Things are going to take a turn. We are not going to continue the black and the gray. I have another idea that I'm going to be exploring with volume 3. Let me know in the comments how your project is coming along, and if you have any questions. I'll also add the link for the 100-day playbook if you'd like to grab a copy of that. And also check out the other 100-day project videos to get you going and to support you in your creative journey. Take care.